Amidst the excitement of England actually winning something, there has been some concern that the cost of staging the events is too high and that the long-term economic benefits may not materialise. So what are the plans for the event? How will it impact on buyers, suppliers and planners in the run-in up to and during and after the Games? Will this be the springboard for London to become a world-leading destination, or should the lessons of Athens make us very afraid? Our first of two speakers in this session is part of the senior management team supporting the Mayor in his leading role in delivering the London 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games and their legacy for London. Would you please welcome the head of London 2012 unit for the Greater London Authority, Dan Hawthorne.
Mark Howell from Visit London and I are doing a bit of a topsy-turvy double act. You'll hear from Mark in a minute about the kind of lead up to and the period of the Games themselves. But I'm going to start firstly by setting a little bit of the kind of broader context about what London's expecting to get from the Games, but also talking particularly about what London's looking to in the post-Games period, particularly what the new part of London that's coming out of the Games will look like. So unlike the London Organising Committee of the Olympic Delivery Authority, who are involved in this, the marathon, not a sprint, must be the most overused metaphor, I think, in the Olympic world. But after we won the Games in 2005, and I'm glad to say I can't remember where I was, the 7 years of work, which we all know at the beginning of those 7 years, there are a lot of people in this country who weren't all too confident about whether we'd be able to pull off the construction work and the other preparation that was needed to be done. I'm glad to say that we are, again, I've used phrase, on time and on budget. And in some ways, interestingly, the recession has helped with that. But unlike the bodies that are focused on the preparations for staging the Games, we at City Hall are just as preoccupied with working on capturing the benefits for the city before, during and after 2012. That's partly about London's reputation. Thousands of ticket holders and visitors, obviously millions more in TV viewers. We hope we will, one way or another, definitely have painted a new picture of London on the consciousness of half the global more. And it's up to us to decide what that picture is going to be, a picture that will probably stay in people's minds for a generation or more afterwards. More specifically, we'll be moving to consolidate our reputation as one of the events capitals of the world, obviously not least, we hope in December this year, with the news about who will stage the 2018 World Cup. If that comes to England, including several grounds in London, that will even still further cement that reputation. There are other things that we already know will be different. In your sector, for example, Mark's colleagues in Visit London, the Events for London team there, know that Olympic London already looks enormously attractive to events organisers, which applies in kind of obvious ways to some obvious events that are connected with the Games, like the huge Sport Accord convention that's coming to London next year. But there are other events, for example, connected with sectors with a close interest in the Games, technology, tourism, or some of the big 2012 sponsor firms, where it's really clear that London is kind of, that Olympic London is doing something which kind of pre-Olympic or non-Olympic London perhaps couldn't be expected to do. But the other thing which I spend an enormous amount of my time working on and worrying about and hoping to help to make happen is about the centre of gravity in London moving eastwards. Now, of course, this is not a newer phenomenon or a phenomenon that can be entirely ascribed to the Games. It's a process that kind of more or less started with Canary Wharf and has seen the rise of Excel as a major player in your sector. But the Games will give it some new momentum and, of course, a kind of brand new neighbourhood. In May 2013, we roughly expect, the Olympic Park will reopen as a major new public open space. I think the statistic, which I think no one's ever verified, but everyone always uses, is it's the largest new urban park in Europe for 150 years, a Hyde Park for East London, with new venues assuming their post-Games identities in the months that follow that. And crucially, that's not just the sporting venues, the big iconic stadium, swimming pool, cycle centre, but flexible event facilities like the handball arena, business locations like the Broadcaster Media Centre, and of course the huge new Westfield, new Stratford City Shopping Centre right on the doorstep of the park, which will be a major part of the park's identity, not only in Games time, but for many years afterwards. The park will have outstanding transport connections, and what will, by then we hope, be a range of internationally recognised landmark attractions, including the sports venues themselves, but other things like the ArcelorMittal Orbit, which some of you will have seen the launch of earlier this year, the Anish Kapoor design tower, which has been described in various ways, not least by the mayor himself. But I think that one of the lessons that we've learned from other cities like Athens and Barcelona and so on is that one can't kind of sit back pleased with oneself at having achieved this amazing preparation for the Games
and as press and PR director for the British Olympic Association, was responsible for the Team GB PR at the 1998 Winter Olympics and 2000 Summer Games. Please welcome Mark Howell, Director of 2010 at Visit London.
Thank you very much. My God, that's a lot to live up to after that introduction. I'm a bit worried actually because Director of 2010 means I better be getting on with it straight away. Listen, I've got a couple of things I just wanted to kick off with before I sort of go into things in detail. I just wanted to give you a little bit of a, as you've heard, I've for my sins I've been involved in the game situation for a period of time. But just a couple of thoughts really, just to sort of put a context onto the Games. The Games is an amazing situation, and I've been lucky enough to be through. I started in Atlanta. We all know what happened in Atlanta, and actually a very fine line between a successful Games and a Games that is perceived as unsuccessful. Chris was absolutely dead right. I think Barcelona is probably more relevant to us as London, primarily because of time zone, if not for anything else, in terms of visitors and the way that people will look at their business. But the joy of winning and the despair of defeat, I'm sure you all sat up and watched Redgrave win his 5th gold medal in Sydney, and I was the poor bugger that had to persuade him to come in off the lake to come and do the TV interviews and such like, and I had various BBC people shouting at me saying we've got a live satellite open to the UK, and they've been 45 minutes out there getting the applause of everybody. And I very nearly had to go and swim out to get them, and try and persuade 4 much bigger blokes than me to come in and get on with it. But then the despair of loss, I had to look after Paula Radcliffe when she dropped out the 10,000 metres in Athens when I was working there. So, I mean, it really is both ends of the equation. But what it will do for the city is it will have a huge impact, which everybody says, but it's not until you actually been in one of these things that you look at the totality of the impact on the city, both in terms of how the people are motivated by it, how the whole persona of the city changes. I think back to Euro 96 and what a buzz there was around that tournament and how we all felt about it. But I've got to tell you, the most exciting people I've ever seen around the Olympics are 4 Romanian gymnasts who had their first Big Mac after 4 years of training on lettuce leaves and high-protein diets in the Sydney Games in the Athletes' Village, and you have never seen 4 16-year-olds put down 4 Big Macs in a world record time of 15 seconds, as those kids did. Anyway, on to serious business now, and really looking at the Games. So let's just have a look at it really in terms of a little bit of an overview. Who's going to be around here, during Games time? We've already got about 40 plus NOCs, National Olympic Committees and National Paralympic Associations, looking for their venues. Now, obviously, these are people that are going to be looking for the same spaces as you'd be looking for potentially during Games time. I think what London is attracting, certainly, compared to other cities, is a greater number. It's certainly a greater number of NOCs and sponsor activity than there has been. And those that have done it for a number of Games have probably upscaled as a result of it being London as a marketplace, not least of which is because so many of the European countries are able to actually activate much more easily and cost effectively in terms of bringing people over. It's very hard to take a chief executive 13 time zones to the other side of the world out of the office for a week, when you've got board activity and important business to take care of, to host a couple of receptions at an event that you're involved with. It's much easier if they can come in from Europe, and the same sort of thing with your suppliers and with your staff, etc. So certainly, we've already had the French who booked out Old Billingsgate. Last week, I think it was, you would have seen that Casa Brazil, the place that, if you want a headache through Caipirinha overload, will be taking over Somerset House during the Games. All of the major venues are being looked at, and what I would say at the moment is there's a lot of what I call fishing going on, where people are looking at the different venues and seeing what their options are. They will activate both inside buildings, standalone situations, but also, which I think is great in terms of how the city will look and activate during Games time, is there's a lot of activity looking at in public spaces. You know, the Jamaicans, for instance, are looking at some big public spaces. Usain Bolt having won the Olympics, 100 metres potentially in 6 seconds by that stage, the way that was going. There'll be something out there, and I think what that will give is a greater ability for people to actually integrate and be part of the games. It won't all be closed doors and VIP or think they're very important personal passes only. As far as the sponsors are concerned, you look at the big operators of sports worlds and such like who are bringing people in. They are really on the case with it now. I was talking to Lena Lender from Sports World at the weekend. Certainly, they're looking at what their activation is going to be, and really, I think this next 6 months will probably be a period where they'll start to really hone these things down, looking really at the uniqueness of London. One thing that comes out really overripe, you can have lunch and dinner in Paris or Berlin or any of these places that we've spoken about. You can have, there are hotel rooms all around the world. But what people are really looking for is something that's specifically London and UK orientated, that's going to bring it to life, something that's going to give them something special. So that's really driving where people are looking at maybe where their activations are taking place and what they're going to do. As far as the hotels are concerned, excuse me if you already know this, but I mean, Locock have 55,000 rooms on hold for the Olympic family, a lot of which will come back. That obviously has led to a situation where a lot of people can't necessarily release hotel rooms at this moment, and so it does make jobs very difficult. But there are boutique hotels out there, and of course a lot of people haven't actually signed up necessarily to the low-cost deal. That is an issue, and that is something that is being looked at, and something that will have an effect on us, because it does preclude the ability for people necessarily to go and book up. But I don't doubt that hotels will want to continue their activities with existing suppliers and existing clients. Because they don't want what happens at the Olympics to have an impact on them in 2013, 14 and so on. As far as tickets are concerned, I mean, if you're thinking of bringing people in during the games, a lot of people say, well, you can't get a ticket because unless you're on the public ballot, it's not possible. But there are things, there's a ticket resellers, and that's about, they're going to be appointed in different territories around the world. So each National Olympic Committee will appoint a specific ticketing agent for their marketplace, and so you will be able to get tickets through them to be able to bring clients over. So if you are looking at doing anything specific around the games to bring people in, then that is absolutely possible. Mike Burton actually looks after that, I believe, in terms of the UK side of things. So if you wanted to take people to opening ceremonies or a handball or whatever it might be. And don't also forget that there will be an awful lot of stuff happening on the roads. The marathons, the triathlon will go out onto the roads with the run and with the cycling. You're looking at road cycling, you're looking at running, walking, the long distance walk. So some of this stuff will be activated in public spaces as well. So there's also a chance for people to sample it, even if you haven't got a ticket to get inside the stadium itself. I think the main thing that seems to be happening is that book early and plan early. I know you probably will do this as part of what your natural business is, but I think a lot of people are still sort of thinking what their strategy is going to be and what their plans are, etc. And certainly those people that are getting in early and booking space and talking to people about some concrete plans are getting at this point from the feedback we get, the best value, and also, a lot of people are wanting to know what, a bird in the hand, that's really where people are going. A lot of the time, when you look at Olympic cities, people wait and wait and wait for the best rate, they wait and wait and wait for the best situation, which means that, historically, the fact of the matter is, a lot of hotel stock probably is unused because people hold out for the biggest prices, and therefore there are some good, short-term gains to be made. But I think from a London perspective, the message that's going out there certainly is that people want to know what 2012 is going to bring them, so that they know where they are and they have their plans in place. I know one particular organisation that's placing thousands of rooms at the moment, working around the local situation. The EBU, European Broadcasting Union, they're looking at putting 1,000 people in, and they're already well advanced with their plans. So, a lot of the Olympic organisations are actually booking in and getting their business in place early. There will be lots of content. The Olympic City will be a vibrant place, whether it's the Olympic Cultural Olympics that's going to go on with festivals of music, different zones of London activated, or individual borough activations that are going to be taking place, All of this stuff is in the planning now. There's a cultural diary that's been put together by the GLA through Manira, who runs who's the Mayor's cultural advisor. But on top of what Local are doing and what the GLA are doing, you're seeing a lot of the borough activity happening, and a lot of events that would probably take place at other times of the year will be pushed into that Olympic period, because it's a great way for everybody to showcase their particular part of the city. And particularly their communities. There was a community of over 10,000 or more for over 100 Olympic teams coming to this Games. It will be the biggest home supporters club for any Olympics for Olympic teams that you've ever had. I know when we went to the Gold Coast in 2000 with the team, you know, we used the local British community down there to help us, and we really linked in with them on the Gold Coast and then down in Sydney. So it's really important that link takes place, and we're seeing a lot of activity in that situation. And it means that it's something that where we have a cutback in public spending and such like, but the boroughs are doing something. If it's already paid for and budgeted for, moving it into that period makes a lot of sense for people in terms of activating their part of London. As far as facilities are concerned, you know, there have been about 120,000 hotel rooms come 2012, an increase in hotel rooms at 3-star and below level predominantly, which means that, you know, there'll be plenty of stock out there. You're dead right. I think it was June, 94% full in June was the figure that we just got through for London. It is a pretty full city anyway. But I think as a result of the number of hotel rooms that are available, there will be stock out there, because the Olympics won't take it up, the Olympic family won't take it up in totality. Venue upgrades will certainly take place. Vancouver was great. If you look at actually some of the legacy from Vancouver, you know, Procter & Gamble went into Vancouver and they took over facilities. The German house, which we will have one in London. The Russian house, we will have one in London. Just waiting to see where they go at this particular point. But they really do invest in the infrastructure of the venues that they're taking on board. And I guess the benefit that will have on the industry itself is that there will be, I'm not going to use that word, there will be an upgrade in facilities that will be available for everybody after the Games. Procter & Gamble went in and completely revamped an existing event space and left it absolutely amazing in Vancouver. That will happen out of the London Games as well. Why? Because, you know, there are more people out there looking for spaces than there probably are A1 world-class fantastic situations at the moment, because one NOC might take over 5 spaces, in which case, you know, if you look at the number of venues that there are in town at the moment, you know, there's going to be a lot more diversity of use. They all want to make those world-class offerings for their VIPs and for their sponsors that they're bringing in. You know, the Germans will bring in Deutsche Post, they're bringing Volkswagen, you know, they're bringing German banks, Deutsche Bank. These people want world-class hospitality, and so therefore upgrades will take place at these facilities. In Vancouver, the German house was part of the university setup, and it didn't look like a university, I can promise you, when they left it. And that's a benefit to anyone using those facilities afterwards. Staff training will undoubtedly go up. We've got to become a world-class offering in the city. What I'm hoping is that, you know, whether it's concierges, whether it's people at the venues, whether it's people that are actually employed, you know, part-time to go in, the labour force will have to rise to the occasion and become world-class in terms of their delivery. And already training programmes are being looked at in terms of how people will deliver to these sponsors and these NOCs during the Games, which I hope will then provide a benefit for all of you, not only during the Games, hopefully prior to the Games, because they need to get this stuff in early, and then certainly out moving forwards. Transport's been one of the big things. It's interesting to see the business sector and then the look at conferences and conference business coming in. We're getting a lot of people come in and talk to the business solutions team, to Tracy and the team about conferences going right the way through to 2017. And a lot of the motivation for people coming and looking at using London as a city is because of the infrastructure. You know, the upgrades on the tubes, the upgrades on the transportation network, the upgrades, you know, the extra hotel rooms that come in place. So the infrastructure will be better.
Not of the airline industry as well. A lot of people talk to me about business resilience, my job title, and they people forget that we also have a cargo operation. For our company, that's quite lucrative. There are key clients of ours as well, so we have clients not only upstairs, where you guys probably when you're travelling around the world sit, but we also have clients that we carry cargo for as well. Our aircraft fleet number fluctuates as a result of some of the economic downturn that we've experienced over the last 2 years, probably culminating into November, December last year. That's sort of gone down a bit. I think we've lost 12 aircraft which are nicely parked in the desert. And then that's a level of care that we have to give to our flight and cabin crew as well. Karen talked about looking after customers when they had the issues of the volcanic ash and various other events that occurred over the last few months. We also have to look after a large contingent of our workforce. 16,000 people that can be placed anywhere in the world. We need to make sure that they're looked after, we have a duty of care for them, and we need to repatriate them as well. We have a wide network. We fly to over 78 countries and territories. It's one of the largest networks within the airline industry. That presents a lot of its own complexities and issues. I think David, in the previous session, covered some of the cultural and logistic and infrastructural issues that you come across various countries, and I'll come to those in a bit when we talk about some of the incidents we've had in the last 18 months and how to overcome them when you have a crisis or an event in somewhere like the middle of Africa or even in the States. It's quite difficult to deal with and manage crisis in the States, particularly after 9/11. Huge amount of legislation that you have to comply with, and clearly we want to try and do that, but we need to maintain a level of customer service and customer focus, which when you're tied up with that legislation makes it quite difficult. Another really, really good reason for us to have a really robust contingency plan and emergency crisis management plan. At Heathrow, British Airways has one takeoff or landing every 90 seconds. Now, in the aviation industry, when an aircraft takes off or when it lands, not to scare anybody in the room here, that's when you have the highest likelihood of an event occurring. So every 90 seconds there's a potential at Heathrow for something to happen for British Airways. So our primary function to do our crisis management, emergency planning, make ourselves resilient is so that we can safeguard the interests of ourselves and all our rest of our customers. We also have an obligation to our shareholders, so we need to protect our shareholder value. In a lot of industries, and the airline industry is probably one of the top 5 where brand reputation really sells your brand, really gets people to come back to you and fly with you, safety being absolutely crucial and core to our brand reputation. We need to make sure that we do this well so that we're safe, secure, and people come back to us. And if we do that, that minimises the financial impact to us. So we've developed disciplines where we plan for predictable events and predicted events. So previously, about 2 or 3 years ago, before 9/11 probably is when people had this kind of philosophy. Companies, including British Airways, and it was really prevalent in the airline industry, companies thought if you had a plan, then that's sufficient. People got together in a room, darkened room, they came up with a crisis management plan or a business continuity plan, they put it on a shelf. That was fine. It was all they needed to do. They ticked the box. Those plans we found after 9/11 were very reactive. Clearly, as an airline industry, we had a lot of work to do. And they didn't actually minimise the impact of the disruption. People pulled out the plan, they didn't know what they were doing. The behaviours that we saw during that period were all of these. We were lacking in leadership. Senior people in the company didn't really know what an emergency or crisis management plan looked like. They were being briefed on the hoof. People were unprepared and slow to react. And I think that the Americans recognised that quite a lot after 9/11 and did immense amounts of work to address that, which is why you see so much legislation there. There was limited trust in people. Everybody tried to do everything themselves. You can't do that in crisis. You need people, specialists, to focus on their roles and responsibilities. We saw unintegrated risk management, which meant people closed down. They didn't allow other people to go away and deliver on actions and empower them. There was defensive behaviour. We didn't raise our heads up and look at how creatively we could deal with the situation. low collaboration, very poor comms to customers. Probably a lot of you will have recognised that when you're in an airport, and even if there's a small event of a delay, one of the key things that you want is somebody to tell you what on earth is happening. Well, during the crisis, that's even more crucial. And we were very internally focused. That led to us being very, very ineffective when we talked about mass crisis management and performance. And we, together with other businesses, particularly airlines, sustained significant losses. So during the interim, we did a lot of work, and particularly dealing with recent events over the last 3 years, it led the British Airways to look at things differently. We wanted to develop, adopt a more proactive approach, a more collaborative approach, which engaged our teams, and a much more open approach, transparent approach, which meant that we were able to deliver for our customers. We adopted a style which was much more engaging, and that started from the top. We took really, really decisive leadership. Where we knew events were coming up in the airline industry, it's very predictable. Come December, perhaps November, and some years even in April, we know we're going to get bad weather. That's going to clog up the airport. We know that certainly as British Airways, as other airlines are finding out, early last year, probably May, June last year, we knew that we were potentially going to be in a situation where we were going to be into some sort of industrial relations dispute with our cabin crew community. We know in the summer we have issues with very, very, very high passenger loads, and that clogs up the terminals, particularly transferring customers, where flights sometimes get delayed because of air traffic control, therefore they miss their onboard connections. All of this grunge and we know we can experience that, and we were very poor at pre-planning. So we introduced this virtuous circle where we plan, we prepare, so we have plans on the shelf. Clearly we need to adapt them according to the situation. So as Mark says, my team is responsible for corporate contingency planning. So that's the events that you do know about. So that's the pandemic, that's the cabin crew industrial action, that's the fact that we're probably going to get into this snow this winter. We also plan for business continuity. We apply the same principles for this, so that's the loss of the key system, which is crucial to in our business. If we lose a system, particularly a booking system or a check-in system or a baggage system, our flights don't go anywhere. So we need to have robust backup plans, and we test them. All of our areas, every single station on the BA network, test all of these plans twice annually, and that's for loss of staff as well as loss of the supplier. The other element we have is crisis management, and again, Karen talked a lot about volcanic ash. When British Airways experienced that volcanic ash disruption, we were also in the back end of the strike and in the back end of the consequences of the Northwest aircraft, where they found the gentleman with the bomb in his pants, and who in our industry is now referred to as the pants bomber. And as an airline, we also do an element which a lot of other industries don't, which is emergency planning. That is having robust and tested plans with very, very highly trained people to deal with an incident or a major accident. Again, we experienced that. I don't know how many of you will